can't handle the truth.
Today, we're going to dissect why Canada feels poorer in 2026. Not with vibes, not with political talking points, with numbers, with receipts. We'll break down 5 forces that quietly reshaped the Canadian economy. Population surge, masking stagnation, real wage compression, productivity collapse, investment drought, and the confidence crash. This isn't about doom, it's about diagnosis. Because once you see it clearly, you can't unsee it. Let's start with the illusion. Canada's total GDP continued to grow through 2023 and 2024. In fact, according to Statistics Canada, real GDP posted modest increases even as global growth slowed. Politicians pointed to that number like it was a gold medal. But here's the twist. In 2023, Canada's population grew by more than 3%, the fastest rate since the 1950s, according to federal data. 3%. That is an enormous demographic shock for a developed country. Now, imagine your household income grows by 1%, but the number of people living in your house grows by 3%. Did you get richer? Of course not. Your per-person resources shrank. And that's exactly what happened at the national level. Statistics Canada reported that real GDP per capita declined across multiple quarters from 2023 into 2025. That's not normal for a wealthy G7 nation. Per capita GDP is the difference between feeling busy and feeling better. Canada looked busy. More workers, more housing starts, more consumption. But the output per person? Flat to falling. And here's where it gets darker. When population growth runs ahead of productivity growth, you create what economists politely call capital dilution. Let me translate. Imagine adding 1,000 new employees to a factory, but not adding new machines. Each worker now has less equipment. Output per worker falls. That's dilution. And it showed up everywhere. Housing construction couldn't keep pace. Infrastructure strained. Healthcare wait times stretched. The economy grew in size, but not in strength. Now you might say, okay, but more people means more tax revenue, more demand, more energy. Isn't that good? Yes, if productivity keeps up. But it didn't. From 2022 through 2024, Canadian labor productivity stagnated according to Statistics Canada. Meanwhile, U.S. productivity rebounded sharply in 2023 and 2024, supported by strong business investment and tech sector growth, as reported by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. Flat versus rising. That gap matters. Productivity is economic gravity. It determines how much value each hour of work produces. If your productivity doesn't grow, your wages eventually can't grow either. And that's wound number 2. Real wages. Nominal wages in Canada rose through 2023 and 2024. Employers faced labor shortages. Average hourly earnings ticked up. But inflation had already eaten a large chunk. In 2022, inflation peaked above 8% year over year, according to Statistics Canada. It cooled in 2023 and 2024, but prices never went back down. They just rose more slowly. That means your cost base permanently shifted higher. A worker who saw wages rise 4% while inflation ran at 3% technically gained 1% in real terms. 1%. That's not a raise. That's survival.
Between 2023 and 2025, real wage growth barely outpaced inflation for many sectors. Some households saw gains, others didn't. But here's the key psychological factor. Even if wages catch up slightly after inflation spikes, people remember the shock. Rent jumped 15% in some cities between 2021 and 2023. Mortgage rates more than doubled after the Bank of Canada's rate hikes. And mortgage renewals in 2025-2026 hit homeowners like a freight train. You locked in at 1.8%. Now you're renewing at 5% or more. That's not just math. That's stress. And when millions of households experience synchronized payment shock, consumer confidence weakens. In 2024 and into 2026, consumer confidence surveys showed persistent pessimism compared to pre-pandemic levels. Households reported concern about job security, debt levels, and affordability. You can grow GDP, but if consumers feel anxious, they stop spending. If they stop spending, businesses stop investing. If businesses stop investing, productivity stalls. And we're back to dilution. Now let's talk about the comparison Canadians quietly make, the United States. Because you feel poorer, partly because you're looking south. In 2023 and 2024, the U.S. economy posted stronger productivity growth than Canada. Tech investments surged, capital spending accelerated, U.S. GDP per capita recovered faster. When your neighbor's house gets renovated and yours just gets crowded, you notice. Canada's business investment per worker has lagged the United States for years, according to OECD data. That gap widened in the early 2020s. And business investment is not sexy. It's machinery, software, AI systems, infrastructure. It's the stuff that makes workers more productive. Without it, wages plateau. Here's the uncomfortable question. Why didn't investment surge in Canada the way it did in the US? Multiple factors. Higher regulatory friction in certain sectors, energy project delays, a housing-dominated capital market where investment flows into real estate instead of productivity-enhancing industries. Canada became extremely good at building and trading houses, less good at building globally competitive technology and industrial capacity at scale. That doesn't mean there aren't great Canadian companies. There are. But at the macro level, business investment as a share of GDP remained subdued compared to peer economies. And when you combine subdued investment with rapid population growth, you get exactly what we're seeing, falling output per person. Let me ask you something. If your country adds nearly 1 million people in a year, but GDP per capita declines, what does that say about economic momentum? It says growth is being stretched thin. Now let's layer in debt. Canadian households carry some of the highest debt-to-income ratios in the G7. For years, low interest rates made that manageable. But when rates rise, leverage bites. The Bank of Canada raised its policy rate rapidly between 2022 and 2023 to combat inflation. By 2024, the impact flowed through mortgages, credit lines, business loans. Debt servicing costs climbed. Even if inflation slowed, the interest burden remained. And when households devote more income to servicing debt, they have less for discretionary spending, which feeds back into slower per capita growth. This is the quiet squeeze, not a crash, not a depression, a compression. You're running on a treadmill that's tilted slightly upward. Meanwhile, infrastructure strains become visible. Healthcare wait times, rental vacancy rates, transit congestion. When systems designed for slower growth suddenly absorb rapid inflows, the lived experience changes. You don't need a statistics report to feel that. You feel it in lineups. Costs jumped permanently higher. Now here's the bill. Multiple quarters of declining GDP per capita from 2023 to 2025. Population growth above 3% in 2023, historically high for a G7 country. Real wages barely outpacing inflation after an 8% CPI shock in 2022. Productivity stagnation while U.S. productivity improved. Elevated household debt servicing costs following aggressive rate hikes. Weak consumer confidence readings through 2024 to 2026. Add those together, and you get a nation that looks stable in aggregate, but strained at the household level. The human cost isn't measured only in percentages, it's measured in delayed home ownership, in young graduates moving back in with parents, in families canceling vacations, in skilled workers comparing Toronto salaries to U.S. offers and quietly booking one-way flights. It's measured in that feeling at the grocery store when you don't even flinch anymore. Now here's the part that matters. This is not irreversible. Per capita growth can recover if productivity accelerates, if investment rises, if housing supply expands faster than demand, if wage growth sustainably outpaces inflation. But none of that happens automatically. It requires focus on output per person, not just headline GDP.
Because headline GDP is political theater. Per capita GDP is lived reality. So the next time someone tells you Canada is growing, ask them one simple question. Growing for who?